Welcome to the Voice of Reason at Stryker's Perspective. So, we're talking... That thing gets me every time I need to jump away from that thing. So, we're talking about the NES Classic again. And, actually the question was raised on Pat the NES Punk and their Unnecessary podcast. And we're going to cover the exact same thing, and that's basically if Nintendo made a mistake by not offering downloadable games for its NES Classic. And I thought it was pretty good, and I had some more stuff to add to it. They do, an hour-long podcast. They talked about it for like 4.5 minutes or so. And there were some things I had said, I believe, before, when I covered about the NES Classic being a good thing or not. And so we're going to cover a little bit more. But yeah, that's basically what we're referring to is the NES Classic. How did I phrase that? So is Nintendo making a mistake by not having the NES Classic have downloadable games? And I'm sorry if I've got stuff for Battlefield 1 on in the background. I guess that's just what I'm doing. Instead of having just my voice and ads for the system itself coming out. So, you gotta remember that, Nintendo doesn't know how well this is gonna sell. They know, how many units their Wii Shop games sell, right? They're the only ones that know. They won't necessarily publish those numbers. They know that as many people that were calling in and clamoring for Earthbound, even though Reggie Fils-Aimé apparently was sick and tired of it and wanted it to stop. The actual president of Nintendo, said, "Hey, that's let's put this up for the fans." So yeah, thanks, Reggie. But we don't know if it necessarily. I can't remember if they've released any figures for it, but we don't know if it sold like 500,000, in the first couple of days, and now it trickles down to about maybe a couple of hundred a month. As far as copies sold for Earthbound, on the Wii Shop, who knows? Maybe it sold 1 million. I don't know. Only Nintendo knows. So, they're not quite sure if this is a big enough thing, but, $60, like Pat and Ian were saying on their segment, psychologically, it's an amount that the consumer has proven time and time again to be willing to part with, especially a good piece of electronics or software. That's why games have stayed at, $60 for quite a while. Yeah, it goes up to 70 sometimes, but that's a little bit harder of a sell. 50 is a great price too, but honestly, for the amount of content we're getting, this isn't too bad. So yeah, like I said, the main thing is the cost. You've probably have heard of other sites or other places say that, when they're making their $400 video game console, that, adding, why don't you guys just add this one extra part? It's only $15, it can't cost you that much. Just add it into your system. We don't understand why you can't do that. But when it comes to, someone like Microsoft or Sony actually putting that $15 part into their $400, $500 system, it actually starts to represent a $30 add-on cost for the consumer. So some things often need to get cut. But so what we're basically looking at here is a wireless broadband adapter, right? I guess they could probably do one for $15 to $20. And we could just argue the fact that, okay, maybe that would add $20 onto the cost of the system. So, okay, now we're looking at more like $80 for a system, okay? Just to make things quick. Just to add wireless broadband. And that would probably be the easiest thing to do. You don't have to add a plug. You don't have to add a way for the plug to get soldered onto the board and whatnot. It's just, you add the piece internally to it. It works. I mean, most game systems now have done the wireless thing, and it's pretty cool. It's nice. It's great for the consumer. And if they want to plug it in, they can. But I think the Wii U doesn't. I think it's wireless only. But either way. Then there's customer service. So, when you put out a system like this that can connect to the internet, that has, downloads, it has different availability in different areas, you're gonna have people that have problems with it. You're gonna have people that are like, I can't download this game, or I put my credit card in, but now all of a sudden everything's turned to zeros. Or I got charged for something that I don't understand why it didn't go through. And you're talking about, having employees that you need to pay for this thing, and we're talking about probably like, this is Nintendo, and this could be a potentially pretty big thing. We're talking about like 15 to 30 employees, on this thing. So many set to answer phones, so many on the technical side that are making sure that the downloads, get put in, that they upload correctly. Availability in different areas. Some games in Europe might not just be available, so they gotta put in something different already. The Famicom Classic system has different games. You got network issues and whatnot, and you really shouldn't, because we're not talking about, it doesn't need to be a fancy wireless adapter. It could even be dial-up almost, to the point, because we're talking about 1 to 3 megabyte games at most, right? But I mean, do you put ads on this network? So you're talking about an entire infrastructure. The other concern that Nintendo would probably have is, how does this bypass the Wii Shop channel? Nintendo knows how much that, $5 copies of Super Mario and Mario 2 and Mario 3 are selling. So by putting them on this machine, it's like, well, now we're kind of undercutting ourselves. So instead of paying $5, for these games, which they're actually at a discount at the moment. They're actually, what is it, like $2.99, I think, on the Wii Shop channel, while this thing's coming out. So they have to think about that too. Are we undercutting ourselves, essentially? But the absolute huge thing for it is probably going to be the licensing. So if you know anything about licensing, and Pat and Ian touched on some of this as well, but licensing is basically linked to each device separately. So if I say it would be for something different. But if I want to put Ninja Gaiden on the Wii, it's like, okay, well, that's going to be a set price of this and that. And, I also want to put it on, the Wii U, shop network or whatever it's called. And, it's like, well, that's going to be different because you're licensing it on a different system. Same thing if I were to, even say put it on iOS, or for some reason if Apple were to have Ninja Gaiden there, the NES version, by all means. It's like, well, it's a different device, it's a different platform, it's different licensing. You might be able to combine everything depending on, I guess, who you are, but ultimately the publisher's going to want to get a royalty for each one on each platform, and they're going to be different. So, initially, we're basically just dealing with everybody gets the same games, right? So licensing is just, all across the board, no difference. If a unit sells of the NES Classic, Konami gets a little piece of it, and so on, because everyone's getting the same games. Otherwise, you're talking about if some are gonna be downloadable, or if all are gonna be downloadable, or if they're gonna be released differently. Now you're talking about you got to get licensing for, like, well, what's the royalty going to be for Konami, for their games? Are they even going to give you something like Castlevania 3, which some of us are kind of looking forward to maybe getting that in the future? Maybe they won't let us have that because, everything else was bundled as a product being initially, given to the player in one big lump sum. Maybe they want to do something differently, or maybe they won't do it if it's going to be individual game sales, because, who the heck is going to be buying Castlevania 3? So they're probably not going to get many royalties in it, so they want everything to be all-inclusive. So that, it's a different kind of licensing deal. You're going to have to renegotiate deals for a long-term service now, because you're going to have, continual sales coming in as well, and it's kind of a complicated thing, and quite honestly, Nintendo probably could just put everything, together into one package and put it out there in, the easy amount of effort. And, all games, it just would be different for all games being included before, and now, some would be sold separate. So that's probably, Nintendo's concern. I mean, they can, let them put out their $60 thing. Let this thing sell gangbusters. Nintendo have their shortages. I believe all pre-orders have already basically sold through. So, that initial batch is pretty much gone. But this is actually happening a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving in North America. So, well, I guess the USA, Canada doesn't really have Thanksgiving. So they're allowing a couple more weeks before that Black Friday shows up. They're allowing, even a couple of weeks or 3 weeks even before that, before actual Christmas comes out, for them to get more shipments out. So, if the demand is high, not only for the holiday season, and if this thing sells gangbusters, and if it keeps selling really well into, January and February, who knows? The president of Nintendo might sit back and think, hey, this could be a very viable platform, and we should really, do some more stuff. I mean, why can't the same device play Super Nintendo games? I know it looks like an NES, right? But you can plug any controller you want into it. What about TurboGrafx 16? They have some already on the Wii Shop channel and the Wii U channel. Why can't those be available if all it is just a system on a chip, right? I mean, it'd be so easy to add stuff to that. So when they start to have to think, about adding downloadable games, the real question is, well, do we stick with the NES or do we expand the library and make a Nintendo Universal Console instead of just a Nintendo Entertainment System console? So there you go. But yeah, so that's the segment. I'm still thinking about doing live action for this, but to kind of break it up between when I stop, and when I do this. But so I put in some Resident Evil. But yeah, that's my 2 cents about the downloadable thing. It kind of boils into the same thing. I mean, this thing needs to sell really well, and if it does, maybe Nintendo will take notice and actually make something. Maybe they'll make an NES with downloadable games. Maybe they'll make a Super Nintendo Classic, but they'll also have NES games. You can buy all 30 of the original NES games that were showed up, plus additional ones, and blah blah blah. Maybe they'll make a universal. Right now it's just a cool thing. It's just a cool thing to have in your collection. Like, hey, what's that? Oh, that's an original NES controller, and it's got Nintendo's name on it. So that's not like a remake, but it's got a different plug. Explain that, video gamer, whose house I am in apparently at this moment. And then you would tell them, oh yeah, it's this. It's got 30 games and HDMI, and you're like, oh, you're blowing my freaking mind. Your friend that's over at your house apparently. And it's great. It's a cool little thing that you can put on display, and it looks like a Nintendo. And, with 50 million sold of the original Nintendo, it's cool to have a little mini one, because most people have probably, either let their Nintendo rot somewhere in a basement or a closet or an attic, or they've sold it, right? So it's cool for them to see it again. So I don't know if Nintendo could make like a universal console, where basically they could have downloads for the TurboGrafx 16, the NES, the Super Nintendo, and maybe even just throw in, 5 or 10 games from Nintendo 64. Why not, right? I mean, they have the dual analog stick controller, what do they call it? I forget. The classic controller? It's there. It can basically emulate what a Nintendo 64 can do, so you can put, some of your favorite stuff there. So, like I said, you should really be more excited about the possibilities that this thing can bring to the gaming industry. And dear God, if Sega gets wind of this and they decide to drop the company at Games, the Chinese company that's making their crappy crap, system that they keep putting out, that's always only AVs and you can never save to it, that plays cartridges. If Sega got motivated enough to do something that is one step beyond what Nintendo's doing with their NES Classic, maybe offering more games, holy crap, we're living in a great time. So those are my thoughts. We'll see you later. Thanks for watching, and please like